Hi all, so today we are solving another LLD question. This one is design logging system and it is a very important LLD problem. So few days back, one of my friends faced this question in their Amazon interview. Also, I read in lead code that it was recently asked in Microsoft as well. So let's get started. So again, as per our previous videos, we have certain focus points and we will go through them one by one as we will solve this question. First and primary focus of any LLD problem is requirements gathering. Okay, this is the foremost and the most important point, and if we can crack this particular point well in an interview, we will be done with almost all the other stuff in an interview. Okay, so let's get started and try to figure out what are the functional requirements for a logging system. So now, whenever you think of a logging system, if you have ever worked on a production environment, you would know that any system supports different logging levels. Okay, so our system, the logging system which we will be building, should also support different log levels. Here I have taken 5 different log levels: debug, info, warn, error, fatal. You could take 3 of these. We really don't need to have everything there. Okay, you could mention that we can take 3 of these and we can extend it to 2 more log levels, something like that. Okay, second important functional requirement is that we should be able to write the logs in various destinations. So sometimes we write the log in the console, sometimes we might append it to a file, and the requirement may be to add the logs to a database so that we can analyze the logs later. Third important functional requirement is the system should provide a configuration mechanism to set the log level. Obviously, so if you have ever worked in a production environment, whenever we are debugging any issue, what we do is we set the log level to debug, right? Or we ask the customer to set the log level to debug and share the logs with us, right? So we will have to do that configuration, right? So we will provide a mechanism to configure the log level and the output destination. Where do you want the logs? In a console file? In a console, or in a file, or in a database, right? So these three are the core functional requirements. Okay, in an interview, we are not required to write 5 functional requirements. Okay, for an interview, have as like basically having 3 functional requirements is more than enough. Having 3 functional requirements is basically the best number. Okay, three efforts are a very good number. Okay, so these 3 are enough. Since here we are practicing, I have mentioned 2 more points. One is that whenever we are logging the messages, I have followed a specific format, which is timestamp, then the level, and then the message. And fifth one is that our system should be thread safe. Obviously in a concurrent, when concurrent loggers are running, our system should be able to handle that. Now, what are the design patterns we can use in this question? Usually, I handle design patterns after going through the entities and the class diagrams, but I figured out that if we work on this design patterns early on, then the entities and class diagram can really make use of these design patterns. And for logging system, if you look carefully at our first 3 core functional requirements, these core requirements are giving us the 3 design patterns which I have noted down here. Okay, so the first functional requirement is to support different log levels, right? And also few days back when we solved ATM design, I talked about the chain of responsibility pattern, and chain of responsibility pattern suits or fits very well into the logging system. Chances are that if an interviewer has asked you design logging system, they want you to implement the chain of responsibility pattern. Okay, this is the most important design pattern for a logging system. Okay, so you have to implement it. You will have to implement this. So to implement different log levels, we need the COR pattern. So by COR pattern, we will create a chain of log handlers. Okay, and our request or our message will pass through each of these handlers, and they will decide whether they have to process it or pass it. Okay, now The second FR was writing the logs in different destinations. Now here the strategy pattern can come in handy, because we can have different implementation for each of these uh, appenders, or for each of these destinations, right? And we can handle that using the strategy pattern. Singleton pattern. So when we say that we will provide a configuration mechanism in any application, there should be only one instance of logger. So if you have worked in production environment, you might have seen that in your system, in your code, there is only one instance of the logger, and that logger is used everywhere, right? So that is, or that can be managed via the singleton pattern. And so basically in an interview, we are not required to use so many design patterns. Two design patterns is a very good number. So I would suggest you to go with chain of responsibility pattern and singleton pattern, because these two are the most important design patterns for a logging system. Now let's take a look at the entities. Again, to identify the entities, go through the functional requirements. Your functional requirements will give you the list of all the entities you require. So here we discussed that we need different log levels. As soon as we see something like this, I hope your mind is already telling you to use an enumeration for the log level. So we are taking enumeration for the log level. Now for the log levels, what pattern are we using? We are using COR pattern, right? COR pattern to create a chain of log handlers. So we need one abstract log handler class, and we need logger class for each of these, correct? So that is what we have implemented here: debug logger, info logger, warn logger, error logger, pattern logger, and one common abstract class, which is the log handler. Let's move ahead to the second functional requirement. We want to write logs in various destinations: console, file, and database. So, and we are using the strategy pattern for this. So here we have one common interface, log appender, which will have the contract, okay, where we will write the append method, and file appender, console appender, db appender. These are concrete implementations of log appender. Okay, so till now we haven't done any calculation as such. We are simply going through our function requirements one by one. We are picking up the design pattern which we have used, and we have written the entities. Third function requirement was to have a configuration mechanism. So we can have a class for it, logger config, which will handle the configuration for us. Fourth function requirement is to log the messages in a particular format, timestamp, level, and the message. So for that we have a class log message, which will handle the doc message related details. So for a particular log message, you will have the log level, the timestamp, the thread, okay, thread name might as well be there, also the exact message, the system message, okay. And we thought of using the singleton pattern, okay, for the one global instance of logger. So logger is the singleton class which will handle logging, okay. This is basically the main, or the core class which will handle the entire logging functionality, and a main class which will serve as the entry point. Again, ideally you should try to figure out the entities yourself, and then come and see other solutions, what other people are using in their code, what other people are mentioning in their videos, and try to figure out that if you were in line, or if you were totally looking at some other pieces of information and all that. So you should try it out yourself, and then only you would be able to get better at this. So for now, this is good. Let's move ahead with the UML for this, okay. Now so let's take a look here. So for log level, we have defined the enum. Let me zoom in. Yeah, so we have defined the enum, okay, log level. We have a log message. As I mentioned, for a particular log message, we can have timestamp, level, message, and the thread name, okay. You may or may not have this. Obviously, for an LLD problem, there is no one single correct solution, okay. There are multiple different approaches, and you just have to mention one of these approaches in an interview. Now log handler, this is our COR. Here is our COR, okay. So this is the abstract class log handler, and as you know, whenever we are using the chain of responsibility pattern, we need to have the next handler. You need to have the next handler, okay. Now any log, basically whenever we are logging something, we will log it to some destination, right? That destination is being managed via the log appender. That is why we are using the appender here inside the log handler. Okay, then we have a handle. So this is where the core functionality or the core logic will lie. Okay, and an abstract function can handle. So basically we will implement the can handle in each of these logger classes, and only if the log level set by us is equal to the log level of this individual classes, we will log that particular message. Okay, so you will understand this better when we will look at the code. Okay, so this is the log appender. As I mentioned, it would be an interface and we have implementations of it. So I have implemented the file appender and the console appender. Okay, so in console appender we simply have the append, and in file appender you might as well have the file path. Then we have the logger config. So when we are configuring a logger, when we are setting up the logger, we would mention what the log level is, and we would want to mention where we want to write the logs, or get the logs in a file or in the console. Now this is the singleton class which is doing everything for us, which will manage everything for us. So here we have the singleton instance. Okay, we have a config, we have the root handler. So we have the log handler, and then we create a chain of handlers. So here we have the root handler. Okay, the log, this is the core functionality or the core function which will be called by our demo class. Okay, so we have log here, we will get the log level and the message, and we will log it. Okay, and configure. So basically to configure you can use this function, or you can also do it inside the constructor, as you wish. This is again based dependent on your implementation. And this is the logging system demo. So let's take a look at the diagram. So this is the class diagram. Okay, we have already gone through each of these, so I'll just we will just breeze through this class diagram. So we have the enumeration log level, we have the log message. Okay, it is using this enumeration or dependent on this enumeration. We have the logger config which has the log level and the appender. Here we have an appender. Okay, now the appender has this method append, which will be implemented by each of these concrete implementations, file appender and console appender. And we have this log handler, which is the abstract class used in the chain of responsibility pattern. And here are the concrete implementations for each of the loggers. This is the demo. So here we could have a arrow going in from logging system demo to the logger, and here we have the logger. Okay, it's not a very tough system, it's not a very big system. If you have a basic idea of what a logging system is, you should be able to come up with this diagram. Okay, anyways, I mean the more you look at different solutions, you would be able to understand what is going on here. So now we can take a look at the code. Okay, so let's take a look at the code. Okay, let's get started. So let's go through whatever whatever files we have created in the code. So this is the log level, this is the enumeration. Okay, this is probably the easiest part of the system. Okay, now we have appenders. Okay, so let's take a look at the interface. So as I mentioned, the interface will have the append. Okay, that's it, nothing else. In console appender, basically what console means is we are appending the message to a terminal. So we have nothing but a simple sout system.out.println, and we are printing the message to the terminal. Okay, in file appender, what we are doing is we are taking up a file. Okay, we are taking the file path from the user, and using the file writer and buffered writer, we are preparing the file and we are writing on the file. Whenever we call append, we are writing on that particular file the message. Okay, now we will take a look at the toString function. Okay, and yeah, this is it. So appenders are done and the enums are done. Now what is there in the logger config? So in the configuration, as I mentioned, we will have two things. One is the log level, the level which we are setting. Okay, and the appender, what appender are we wanting to use. Okay, so this is in the logger config. So here also we only have the getter and setter functions and the constructor, nothing else. Now let's take a look at the COR pattern over here. Okay, so this is the abstract class log handler. it has protected variables next handler and appender. Protected basically means that these handlers can access these variables. Okay, so we have next handler and the appender. Now here, in as I saw different solutions, in multiple solutions people have a list of appenders. So that also is a valid thing, because there might be a requirement that, let's say, for debug and info logs, we want to log them in a console, but if it is a fatal or error log, we want to log it into a file. So you might have a list of appenders. Okay, there might okay, so that also is valid. Okay, for now, for simplicity, I have taken one appender, which means we will only have one appender for all the different for any of the logging levels. Okay, so here we have get next handler. This is nothing but the getter function. This is also the getter. These are the getter setters. Okay, nothing else. Yes, here is our core handle method. So now what we check is if can handle, if the particular class can handle the message of this level, log the message. Now log we have implemented over here. Log is doing nothing but calling the append method from the appender. Okay, so if they can handle, log it. Otherwise, move to the next handler if it is not null. Move to the next handler if it is not null. So here I am adding a breakpoint, because I'll show you this in the debug mode, so that we are more clear with what we are actually doing over here. And let's take a look at the concrete implementation. So in the concrete implementations, we have nothing but the can handle function, and it will return true if the level is equal to the log level as set over here. So for all the concrete implementations, we have the same stuff written. Okay, so we are not going through all of them. Now this is the log message. As I said, a message can have the timestamp, the level, the message, and the thread name. Timestamp, you can either provide your own now, or you can take it from the user. For simplicity, I have given it local datetime.now. Okay, and thread name. Okay, now this is our class which is handling all the business logic. So here we have, so this is a singleton class. So we have the instance, we have the logger config and the root handler. Okay, nothing is going on here in the logger. As I said, you can avoid this function entirely and do this inside the constructor itself, or I have created another function, so as you wish you can do. Okay, so here is the log method which our demo or the main class would be calling. Okay, so it has the level and the message. So if now this ordinal is inbuilt method provided in Java, so here we have given the enum for log level. So what ordinal does is it would map each of these enums to an integer sequentially. Okay, which means debug is mapped to 0, info is mapped to 1, warn is mapped to 2, error to 3, and fatal to 4. Okay, this is nothing, simple mapping. Okay, nothing else. So I'm using that internal method. So basically we are saying that suppose I have set the log level to war. Okay, I'll add a breakpoint here as well. So suppose I have added or I have set the log level as war. So warn's ordinal would be ordinal is 2, right? So if it is greater than or equal to, sorry, basically yeah, so basically this is the log. Okay, this is the log level. This is what we have set. Okay, we would set in the configuration, right? So in the configuration I have set 1. Okay, so this is 2. Now someone wants, or someone has added debug log, right? So debug log's ordinal is 0. 0 is not greater than or equal to, so we will not log the message. We will not log the message. But if if a fatal error is coming, so for that the ordinal would be 3 or 4. Okay, so since that is greater than or equal to wants ordinal 2, so we would handle it and we will log it. Okay, again let me add a breakpoint here as well. So yeah, and this is our running or the driver code. So I have created logger for basically instances of each of the loggers, and I have set the next handler. So here also let me add breakpoint. We can see how the chain is being formed. Okay, So here I have created both the appenders, console appender and file appender. So for debug logger, I have set the console appender. For info, I have set the console appender. For warn, error and fatal, I have set the file appender. So now when I was saying that you could also have a list of appenders, you could say that if it is a warn message, add it to both the console and the file. You can have something like that. That is why. But here we are going with one appender per logger. Okay. So here I have set the configuration. So my configuration is now set to debug. Let me set it to warn. Okay. So I have set the configuration to warn and I have given this appender. So I'm saying, okay, whatever it is, you log it to the console. Console. Let me provide here console appender. Or for now, I am replacing all the file appenders with console appender so that you can understand via looking at the console itself. Okay. Yeah. So again here I have configured, okay, using the configure function, and again you could use it, pass it to the constructor itself from the get instance. Yeah, so now here if you see I am logging, I'm using the log method of our logger. Okay, I'm passing the log level and the message, now I have set the log level to 1, which means I should only see these three, right? I should only see these three, not the other these logs. I should not see the debug and the info logs. Okay, here I have created 3 different threads. Okay, anyways, I think let me run this and show it to you. Actual command not found. Okay, let me run it. So here you see we are not getting the info and the debug logs. We are only getting the warn, the error and the fatal logs. Okay, and these are coming from the threads. So we are logging the timestamp, the log level, after that the thread name. So here we have different thread names, and after that the message. Okay, now let's do one thing. I had set certain breakpoints, so let's run it in the debug mode to take a look at the breakpoints. Okay, so let's come over here, and yeah, now we should be able to, yes. So here let's take a look at how the COR pattern is actually working here. Okay, so what I am doing is I'm setting info logger as the next handler for the debug logger, right? So inside the debug logger, right now if you see, next handler is null. Okay, let me step over. Now if you see, now when this is executed inside the debug logger, next handler is set as the info logger. Right now info logger's next handler is null. So let's step over. Now if you see, debug logger's next handler is info logger's next handler is warn logger. So this is how the chain is getting formed. Okay, so here if you see, here, so debug to info to warn to error, and if I step over once more, it would also populate the next handler of error logger to fatal logger. So the chain is formed for each of these loggers. Okay, for debug we have all the loggers. For info we have info, warn, error, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I think this is clear. Let's move ahead. So here we are creating an appender. Here we don't have anything to see. We can continue. Okay, we don't have anything to look over here. So if you could just see that, once we are done with setting the appenders and stuff, for debug logger we have set the console appender. For info logger we have set the console appender. For error logger, right now I have set the console appender, but if we would have file appenders, then for some of the loggers we would have the file appender. Now let's get ahead. So here, wait a minute, let me close all of these. Yeah, so here I have set the config. So in the configuration, if you see, I have set the log level as warn. See, log level is set as warn. Okay, and I have set the appender as console appender. Okay, now let's step over. Here we are getting the instance. And now, okay, now here is our main functionality, the log method. So we will step into this function. So I'm calling log. Okay, I have set the logger config as warn. Okay, we have set it as warning, and here I am calling log on a debug. So I should not see this. Now how it is happening, let's step into this function. So we have stepped into the log function. Now our logger config and root handler, they are not null. Okay, they are not null. That is why we will not step into the if. We will move ahead. Okay, now here the level which I am getting is debug. See, the level which I am getting is debug. The ordinal for it is 0. The logger config has set the log level as 1, whose ordinal is 2. So I set the log config as warning, right? Its ordinal was 2, right? So now, since 0 is not greater than equal to 2, we will not enter into the if condition and we will move out. So okay, I'll just avoid going into the specific classes, but we will move out from this. Okay, and here again we move on to the next we come to the next log function, which is info. So again I'll step over, let's step over. Now let's take a look at what happens when we are getting warn. Okay, let's step into. So again, these are populated, these are not null. Now here if you see the level ordinal, what is coming is 1, its ordinal is 2. Is it greater than or equal to the ordinal which we have set? Yes, we set the ordinal as 1. We set the log level as warning, and its ordinal is 2, which is greater than or equal to 2. So we will step into, right? So let's step into. So now here, okay, let me avoid this. Yeah, so here we are let me just avoid these internal functions, and now we will move inside the log message. Yes, so now we are moved inside the log message. We have created the log message. Okay, we are going to its constructor and we have created the log message. Let me just step over the entire thing. Step over. Is it done? I think, yeah, I think the breakpoints are done. But anyways, so the log message would be created. Let me check here. Okay, log message will be created. Okay, I think there was some issue, that is why it stopped. So here the log message will be created. After that, so now here if you see the log message, let me go ahead, step over. So the log message is created. Okay, inside here you can see the message, the thread name, the log level, and the timestamp. Timestamp would be now. Okay, so now again here we are calling the root handler. So this handler is this handler which we set. Okay, dot handle log message. Okay, so now let's again step into the handle. So here we came. This is the handle method, right, as defined in our log handler. So here we are receiving a message, we are checking the message's level, and we are checking if we can handle it. So let's again step into this, what is happening? Okay, so here it is checking for each of the loggers. It will pass through all of these loggers in a sequential fashion. So it will keep on checking if it can handle or not. So right now, previously checked for debug logger. Now, so it couldn't handle for debug logger, so it has moved on to the next handler. Now we previously saw, right, that we had populated debug logger's next handler as info logger. So we move ahead, and now we are calling handle for info logger. Okay, so now it is info logger. This is info logger, and we are calling this. Okay, now info logger scan handle method is triggered. Again, it will result in, it cannot handle a warn level message. So we move ahead. Now we have warning logger. So for the warning logger, we are triggering the can handle. Now we will enter into the true, if condition is true. So now we will go to the log. So now we will trigger this log method over here. Okay. So yeah, let's get it. I don't know, it is stuck, but yes, we will call this log method over here, and the appender will do its job. The appender thing is easy for us to understand. Yeah, I think that will be it for this video. Basically, for the code explanation, this will be it. Okay. Now, so okay, I have written down few more points over here, which are API design and database schema. But when working on the solution, I figured out that for a logging system, we really do not need the API design, because logging system is not a customer facing application. So we usually have APIs for a customer facing application. So it didn't make sense to me to work on the APIs for it. Similarly for database schema, usually, companies do not store their logs in a, traditional RDBMS database. They would store it in Kafka, they would store it in files, they would store it in, some dedicated services, but definitely not in a RDBMS. That is why I have avoided working on the database schema as well. For these 3 points, you can go through it yourself as well. I went through these. So basically, in an interview, an interviewer would want to understand how your code is applying each of the solid principles, or if your code is applying the solid principles, if your code is compliant with the oops, or if your code is using dependency injection or stuff like that. So it's always better that whenever you have you are done with the question, you can write it out yourself, that is your code following the solid principles. This I haven't written it myself, I have used ChatGPT for this. You can also use ChatGPT for this. So basically you should be able to answer in an interview that yes, your code is following the OCP, the open close principle. How? Because it is open for extension. How? So if you want to add a new Kafka appender, you can add it to the log appender, right? That is why. So you can do it yourself, or you can take a look at these notes. You can pause it and read it, anything. For oops as well, so I have mentioned how my code is following the encapsulation and inheritance. Obviously I have used ChatGPT for this. You can use GitHub Copilot, Cloud Code, anything. But it is beneficial, because in an interview, these questions are really asked. How your code is compliant, how is your code modular, how is your code extensible, is your code testable, all that questions. So it's good to have certain vocabulary prepared, some answers already prepared, rather than thinking it on the fly. So yeah, that is it. I think that is it for this video. Also, for the concurrency requirements, if you have noticed, I have made certain functions as synchronized, so that when multiple threads are trying to access the same function, only one of them get access to it, and we will not get any issues. That is why inside the demo I've created multiple threads to test this. Okay, and it's working perfectly fine. So yeah, this will be it for this video. Thanks for watching. In the upcoming videos, I'll come up with more of the LLD questions. Also, I'm thinking to come up with Java interview questions specifically, because I think in Java you can have like 1 hour interview based on hash map itself, or 1 hour interview based on solid principles itself. So yeah, I think I'll come up with those videos. If you have any requirement, if there's any particular suggestion for some specific kind of videos, do let me know. Since I'm preparing, I'm doing this job search preparation. So I'm also in the same group. I'm trying to figure out the questions, I'm trying to get the interviews, I'm trying to read interview experiences, I'm trying to solve questions, LLD questions, HLD questions. I'm working on my Java skills and all of that. So yeah, if there's any suggestion, any feedback, do let me know. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for watching.